It was supposed to be a spiritual retreat, a quiet escape into the vast Egyptian desert. But within hours, it became a nightmare burned into history, a tragedy the world barely remembers. September 13th, 2015, 14 Mexican tourists arrived in Egypt, excited to explore the Western Desert, a place known for its silence, beauty, and ancient mystery. They were artists, professionals, spiritual seekers. Led by a Mexican tour guide and local operators, their plan was simple: a guided meditation journey through the desert dunes. Before they left, their Egyptian guides followed every rule. They notified local police, they obtained official permits, and the Egyptian army approved their route. Everything was cleared, every step was authorized. But what happened next defied all logic. As the convoy drove deep into the Western Desert, an Egyptian military helicopter appeared overhead. Without warning, missiles struck. The vehicles exploded. Bodies were thrown across the sand. The sky filled with smoke and chaos. It was over in minutes. The army had attacked its own civilians and 14 foreign tourists. 8 people died instantly, including 7 Mexicans. Others were severely burned, left screaming for help in the middle of the desert. Survivors said the bombing was relentless. The military returned to fire again, as the survivors tried to hide behind rocks and burning cars. And then, just as suddenly as it began, silence. The same army that had given permission to enter the area had now bombed them from above. What followed was confusion, and then a wall of silence. Egypt's government released a short statement. They claimed the group had entered a restricted zone, an area where the army was chasing militants. But the truth didn't add up. The Mexican ambassador to Egypt confirmed the tourists had official permits. Their route had been approved by both police and military. So why were they attacked? The Egyptian government said it was a mistake, a tragic case of misidentification. But that explanation didn't hold. How could a military-authorized convoy with clearly marked tourist vehicles be mistaken for militants? Even worse, no one took responsibility. No official was charged, no pilot was named, and no transparent investigation was ever completed. The survivors were flown to Cairo, burned, terrified, and surrounded by silence. Their phones were confiscated, their testimonies were monitored, and officials warned them not to speak publicly. Meanwhile, in Mexico, outrage spread like wildfire. The Mexican government demanded answers, diplomats called for accountability, families pleaded for truth. But Egypt remained firm, claiming operational confusion. No further explanation. Over time, details began to emerge, quietly, through survivors' testimonies. They said there were no warning signs, no checkpoints, no military presence nearby. Just a sudden violent strike on a group of innocent travelers. Journalists began to suspect something darker, that the army had launched an operation without properly identifying targets. And when they realized their mistake, they buried it. Local media in Egypt were silenced, reports were censored, and foreign journalists were warned not to distort the story. Behind closed doors, the Egyptian Tourism Ministry privately compensated the victims' families without admitting guilt. But no justice ever came. Years later, the survivors still carry scars, physical and emotional, while the mystery of why they were attacked remains unanswered. The area of the bombing was part of a tense military zone, where Egypt claimed to be fighting extremists in 2015. But there's no record of militant activity there that day, only the Mexican group. And that raises the question, was it truly a mistake, or something meant to be erased? Satellite data, testimonies, and official contradictions suggest that communication between Egypt's own agencies broke down, or worse, was deliberately ignored. The Mexican group had clearance from tourism police, but not all military units had been informed, meaning someone failed, or someone lied. To this day, no one knows who gave the final order to fire. The Egyptian pilots involved were never named, and the investigation results were never made public. The victims' families in Mexico still demand accountability. They ask the same haunting question: how can a nation bomb tourists, then hide behind silence? 9 years later, the world has largely forgotten. But for those who survived, the sound of helicopters still echoes in memory. A peaceful retreat turned massacre, and a tragedy hidden beneath bureaucracy and politics. A group of ordinary travelers seeking peace and reflection in the desert, only to be caught in a web of military power, miscommunication, and silence. Perhaps the scariest part isn't the attack itself, but how quickly the truth disappeared. A case closed without closure, a massacre without justice, and a reminder that even in the modern world, truth can be buried beneath the sand.